Most common questions I get is, Mauricio, what should a passive investor ask the sponsor prior to investing? And so I came up with a couple of these questions. Number one, what is the level of the deal sponsor's experience and track record? Ask any sophisticated investor, and that's probably the number one thing you should be asking your syndicator and really doing your deep dive into the due diligence is what is the level of experience? Anybody can put together a fancy brochure, a fancy business plan, but can they actually execute? Question number two, what is the level of experience and track record of the asset management team? Now, some of you may be surprised to learn that the sponsor and the asset management team sometimes are two different groups. The person that you're dealing with, the sponsor, the person that you know, like, and trust and have the relationship with, they may not be involved in the day-to-day operations once the raise has been complete and the property has been closed on. So it's really important to figure out who is actually doing the work, who is actually executing on that business plan to make sure that the person that you're relying on is actually involved, because it's not uncommon these days with so many sponsors that some sponsors tend to sort of fade away after the deal is closed and you don't get to see them as often. So ask specifically, who is going to be asset managing? What roles does everybody on the team have? And make sure that the person that you know, like, and trust is part of the asset management team. Question number three, what is the sponsor's investment philosophy? You want to make sure that your investment philosophy is aligned with the investment philosophy of the sponsor, because this may be a great deal. It might have all the bells and whistles for everybody else, but if you're a cash flow investor and what's most important for you and your philosophy is you want to have monthly cash flow, and this particular deal is a heavy value add, you're not going to see cash flow for a while, make sure that there's an alignment between your investment philosophy and theirs. Question number four, what happens if the sponsor dies? This is obviously a bigger deal if you have one sponsor, which many of the syndications are, so you want to make sure that whoever you're entrusting your money with, the person that you know, like, and trust, what happens if they pass away? But even if there's multiple investors, if the main syndicator passes away, what's the game plan? Question number five, how does a sponsor fees compare with the industry average, and do they have their own money in the deal? This primarily has to do with alignment. Again, you want to make sure that the syndicator's goals and results are aligned with yours, and so you want to have a fee structure that actually encourages them for the project to succeed. Number six, ask the sponsor what they believe is the worst case scenario for this particular investment and how they plan to mitigate that worst case scenario. You're looking for the weakest link. Like, how does this thing actually collapse? Ideally, you go through, do your due diligence on the project, and you should be able to find out what the weakest link in the deal is and what the worst case scenario is, so that when you ask the sponsor what they believe it is, you already have an answer, and hopefully you guys are either coming up with the same answer, so it's confirming your due diligence, or maybe they're going to come up with something else that you hadn't really thought about. About the 5 things every syndicator must know to stay out of jail. Now, I will admit that jail is probably a long shot, unless you're out there defrauding investors and committing, flat out fraud like Bernie Madoff. The odds of you going to jail are slim. Number one, creatively structuring your real estate syndications to avoid securities laws won't work. Now, this gets broken down into sort of 2 categories. One are the brand new syndicators who don't know any better, and then there's the seasoned investors who know better but just think that they're going to get creative. Number 2, the SEC has zero tolerance when it comes to advertising your deal on social media when you're not supposed to. Remember that if you're doing certain type of exemptions, primarily a 506B, you're not allowed to advertise your deal or generally solicit. For some reason, people don't think that applies to their social media posts when it absolutely does. Number 3 is that you cannot pay unlicensed people to help you raise money. This has really become a big deal lately, and there's a lot of people doing it right now. But if somebody helps you raise capital, makes a referral, or literally goes out and raises capital for you, you cannot pay them to do that. Number 4, syndicators need to understand what a pre-existing substantive relationship is. This is the key on a specific exemption, which most people use, which is the 506B exemption. In order, since you cannot advertise and you cannot generally solicit, in order to be able to have an investor come into your deal, you generally have to have what we call a pre-existing substantive relationship. You can't just meet somebody at a conference one day, get them on your mailing list, and then the next day send them a deal, because you have to have a substantive relationship. Number 5, don't use other people's PPM templates. One of the things we have to do, obviously, is provide the investors with a private placement memorandum or a PPM, which are all the disclosures that we must provide to investors. There's a bazillion PPMs on the internet. You can go on the internet, you can grab one for free, or you can go on the SEC website and you can get other people's easily. And I know too many people actually do that. But the templates or the PPM itself, they're kind of worthless. They're really more of a, what I like to call a pipeline or a conduit, where you actually have to stuff that with information. You've got to put the disclosures and the risks and all that information pertaining to your specific situation.